On this Wednesday edition of the OFN Today, Marc Lawrence of Experts.Covers.com will be here to preview his top college football and NFL games of the week, while special guests include Michigan State analyst Hondo Carpenter, Wisconsin analyst Ben Worgull, and New York Giants beat writer Ryan Dunleavy, as the OFN Today on the Our Lads Football Radio Network starts now. It's Wednesday, October 10th, 2018. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for tuning in to the OFN Today. And the OFN Today is brought to you by OurLads.com, providing the best pro and college football depth charts on the net. StoreStreams.com. The StoreStreams music service offers a complete solution for restaurant, bars, hotels, and retailers of all sizes in need of background music for their business. StoreStreams.com music service plans start at just $20 a month. And Covers.com, featuring live score, stats, and odds, considered the most convenient and entertaining source for sports news and facts, with over 45 million visits a year. So the halfway point is over, Mark, in college football. Luckily, we don't have to say that about the NFL just yet. But things are starting to get really interesting now in college football for conference titles and, of course, the playoffs. So it's starting to heat up.
It is. It's like a tear coming out of one eye because of the halfway point of the college football season. But as you mentioned, Greg, it's really starting to warm up right now. And, the more we play, the more we can dig deeper into these football teams right now, statistics, the way they played the games, and get a much better handle on these teams moving forward. Yeah,
it's amazing how, and that's why I try at the beginning of the year, every year, to talk about after week 1 and even week 2 and week 3, that it's just too early. You got to get a rhythm. You have to also find out whether teams on especially in college, because their schedules are so all over the place, that you really sometimes don't know whether or not that was just a bad week. Was that a better team than we thought they were, or was that team actually more disappointing than we thought that they were? So that comes into the equation, and that's why it's a little bit harder to really understand where we're at up until about this time. And this is a pretty good time right now in college. I still don't think we're there in the NFL yet.
No, not quite there in the National Football League. Probably at least 6 games, I would say, for these teams to have behind their belt, so that we can feel pretty strong about who they are and where it looks like they're headed. But college football, as you mentioned, halfway point moving forward from this point on.
All right, let's talk about the Big 12 first of all. And the Big 12 has a game on Thursday night, so that's obviously a big one. We've got a couple of Big 12 games to go over. And the Thursday night one, though, Texas Tech and TCU, is very important. A tough loss for Texas Tech against West Virginia. And that's a tough one because, even though they lost that Ole Miss game, and I'm sure that they'd probably like to have that one back, because their young freshman quarterback, Alex Bowman, has been much better as the season has gone on. That was they only scored 27, and I say they only scored 27 because Ole Miss's defense is absolutely pathetic, one of the worst in college football. For Texas Tech's offense to score only 27, you kind of know that if they matched up now, that would be different. But anyway, they come off the big Oklahoma State win, and then they get off to a slow start against the Mountaineers a couple of weeks ago. And but then they were able to come back, even with Bowman going down, getting hurt. The kid Jet Duffy comes in, plays pretty well up until the pick 6 at the end of the game, and that's what sealed it. Now they go to TCU. It's a Thursday night game, and an opportunity, hopefully, to get Bowman back, and that would be big for Texas Tech. It's also going to be big for Bowman, since he is a native of the area, and not only did he grow up in the Fort Worth area, but if he can play in this game, it'll be a game that will be televised nationally on Thursday Night Football.
He's pumped up for the football game, and if he's anywhere near close to being ready to go, he will play. The good thing for Cliff Kingsbury is that he has a 3-headed quarterback situation going there. You mentioned Jet Duffy, McLean Carter, and also Alan Bowman. Any one of these 3 are capable of igniting this Texas Tech offense, which is number 1 in the country in total offense. They're averaging nearly 600 yards a game, and we saw a little bit of it last week when they were down 35-10 at the half against West Virginia, and then outscored the Mountaineers 24-7 to close out the football game. So, very, very dangerous offense for Texas Tech. But the improvement for me for this football team has been their defense this season here. Texas Tech, all known for being a horrible defense in years past, and that's been the one Achilles heel that, if you will, that Cliff Kingsbury has had. It's not a good defense by any means, 448 yards, but it's not a 500-yard defense, which keeps the offense on the field a little bit more than in years past. TCU comes into the football game here. Both these teams have identical records overall and in the conference here, so this will be a separator. This game will. But if there's an Achilles heel for TCU this season here, it's been turnovers. They're at number 124 in the country in net turnovers. They're averaging 1.4 turnovers net per game.
Mm-hmm.
You can't lay points to a prolific offense and turn the football over and expect to compete. And because of all this, and the fact that Bowman behind center, as we anticipate this game being played in Fort Worth, where he's from here, I look for a big effort by Texas Tech in this game.
Yeah, I want to see Bowman in the game. I'm not going to be as confident if Bowman's not in there. Very impressed with Bowman. I think Bowman is just going to be another one of these quarterbacks that Cliff Kingsbury just happens to. I mean, he does a great job of recruiting these QBs. There's no question about that, going back even to Baker Mayfield. So they know what they're doing there at the quarterback spot. But Bowman is a little bit different, and I want to see him in there. And I would suspect he'd be in there because of what the game means. It is a shorter work week, though, so we have to keep that in mind. And I don't know. TCU, I'm not sure where we're at with TCU. I think that if we look at their overall schedule, to tell you the truth, the game that they impressed the most in was the Ohio State game. I mean, that was a game, and because they were sluggish in the SMU game. I didn't really see anything out of them in the Texas game, and they had 4 turnovers in that one. And they were lucky to win the Iowa State game when the Cyclones didn't have any quarterback play. No Purdy in that game. So I'm not sure what to expect from TCU, but I do have a good feeling about Bowman as long as he plays. And they're getting 7 as well. So that's a pretty significant number.
I think it is, too. I think they become what I would call a live dog, a football team, meaning that they're capable of winning this game, and if they don't, that touchdown ensures the fact that you can at least be in this football game right down to the end.
By the way, TCU right now on a 2-9-1 run as a home favorite. So keep that in mind. 2-9-1. That's a big number against the spread as a home favorite. So I think Texas Tech might be the way to go. I would probably even take a look at their money line and tell you the truth. Let's go to the Saturday games, and you've got again, let's talk about the other Big 12 game, and that is the West Virginia-Iowa State game. I talked about this with Dave Koken yesterday, how impressed I was with Purdy and the Cyclones. Cyclones were my sleeper pick in the Big 12. I think that first postponement early on in the season hurt them. And then they just looked completely sluggish the next week against Iowa, who had an opportunity to play the week before. So I didn't think that was a real fair judgment of their team. They had a good effort against Oklahoma, and they did it without Kempt, who was hurt. And then the offense just didn't perform under Noland. Just an inconsistent young quarterback who just never progressed the way that they'd like to see him progress with Kempt out. And finally, Iowa State gives Purdy, good recruit, a scholarship offer from Alabama, so he gets the opportunity to play against Oklahoma State, and he has a fantastic game. 318 through the air, 4 touchdowns, 84 rushing and a touchdown. He was fantastic. They upset Oklahoma State as a 10-point road dog, and now they're at home against the Mountaineers, who have yet to lose. And I just think West Virginia is too inconsistent of a football team to keep going much further without losing. They're off next week, Baylor after that, Texas on the road after that, which means they either lose here or more than likely they'll be undefeated going into Austin. I don't think they're going to be undefeated going into Austin. I think Iowa State's going to upset them on Saturday night.
I'm with you on this one as well in this game, Greg. you're talking about a West Virginia football team that's 5-0. They fit this bill, what we call a fat cat. It's a 5-0 team that's on the road as a conference favorite, which is a really tricky role for these teams to be in. And as you mentioned here, the Brock Purdy party has started in Ames. He not only was he sensational in his debut game last week, but you mentioned Alabama went after him hard out of high school here. He threw for over 7,700 yards in high school in his final 2 years of high school. He is the real deal, and Matt Campbell is just thrilled to have him behind center here right now. As good as Kemp has been for this football team here, I think he'll make this trade, and it could end up it'll be like Nick Saban trading, Tua for Hurts, two good quarterbacks, but you're going to go with the guy that can take you to the promised land, and that could end up being Brock Purdy. And you have to like Matt Campbell, how this role that he's in as a conference home underdog when he comes in off of a win and cover his previous game. He's 11-1 to the spread in that role, a perfect 5-0 at home. I think this all makes for another live dog in Iowa State. And in our newsletter here, we call them upsetting West Virginia in this game.
All right, sounds good. So next up, let's get into one of those obscure games, one of those games you probably wouldn't think of taking, but it is an interesting game. It's Liberty as a 9-point home dog against Troy. Troy's got a 5-game win streak going on. And look, this is like one of those situations that I was talking about where because when we saw that first game of the season, we felt, okay, maybe best team of the Mountain West, best team from the Sun Belt getting together. So that's a nice matchup. And then Boise blew them out. And then all of a sudden I got like, oh, wow, Boise must be really good this year. And then they blew out their next couple of teams. Oh, look at Boise. Then they play Oklahoma State. What happens? Well, they don't look good at all. And things didn't go well for them. And then what happens to Oklahoma State the following, another couple of weeks later? Well, they can't win a game. And then last week, I was glad that I was on the right side of it because I kind of telegraphed that Boise State-Oklahoma State game as a warning sign to Boise because I had San Diego State last week as a double-digit outright upset winner, and they came up big time. I didn't think Rippon would look that bad, but he did. And I think you look at this Troy team now, and you go, wait a second, that Nebraska win may not be as good as we thought because their backup quarterback situation was an absolute joke. They can't even win a game with Adrian Martinez at quarterback. And Boise State isn't as good as we thought they were. But Troy is still a pretty good program. But now they're on the road, and this is not a conference game. We always have to keep that in mind, too.
That's true. This is a non-conference game, and it makes for what I think is a real nice sandwich. Troy in this non-conference sandwich between Sun Belt games. As you mentioned here, they're on a 5-game win streak, but look inside their stats. They've only won the yards, a net of 29 yards per game this football season here. So for all the good things Troy's done, they're not punching people out on the field in the stats like perhaps they should be. And then rolling it back to Liberty, where we talked about them the first week of the football season here, we mentioned again that they were snubbed by both the Conference USA and the Sun Belt, where they applied for admission and were denied both. They got up big time for the Old Dominion game against that Conference USA opponent, and they delivered a message. Now it's Troy arriving from the Sun Belt. I think this is an ideal spot here for Liberty in this football game. Our key catchphrase in this game, as we wrote it up in our newsletter, we closed it out, and we said simply, give me Liberty.
Oh, I like that. Okay, give Mark Liberty. Give me the Flames. And by the way, the Flames, they have some exciting offensive players. I mean, the quarterback, Stephen Calvert, puts up big numbers. He had 417 at New Mexico a few weeks ago. Matter of fact, one of their receivers, Antonio Gandy Golden, if you that's what his name is. I like these hyphens in the names now. I don't know if you notice, Mark, but there's a lot of hyphens in names now.
Yes, there are.
I wonder if they're made up or not. But anyway, the kid Gandy had 245 of those yards receiving. So they've got some interesting skill position players. They can put up big-time numbers. It is a home game, like you said, and there's some motivation there, and we'll see exactly what happens in that one. And then the sleeper Rodney Dangerfield play of the week for Mr. Mark is going to be Michigan State, and Hondo Carpenter, who covers Michigan State football, will be with me in a few minutes. He'll like this one because you like the Spartans on the road Big number, 14. The only thing I'm concerned with is and I got to talk to Mark about this. Mark D'Antonio, not Mark D'Antonio. I like to talk to Mark D'Antonio, but a Hondo Carpenter about this because Michigan State's got they got some injuries that have just been a major issue for them. Their offensive line is decimated. They haven't been able to move the ball in big situations, short yardage situations the entire season. That's a big problem for me. But 14 points in a rivalry game between these two teams is still a big number, and there's some nice little trends you like going on in this one.
I do. I like the fact that Mark D'Antonio has been spectacular with Michigan State as an underdog in Big Ten games. He's 19-8-1 to the number in games. He's also 5-0-1 to the spread as an underdog when coming off a straight-up favorite loss his previous game. As you know, they laid an egg last week at home against Northwestern in that football game here. So, that makes them slighted in this contest here. That's why we call them a Rodney Dangerfield play. No respect for Michigan State here, despite the fact that they upset Penn State as 10-point home dogs last year. They bring the nation's number one ranked rush defense into this football game, does Michigan State. It's like running up against a stone wall. And that takes some tools away from Trace McSorley. It's going to end up having to be McSorley in the air to beat this football team. And if you can count on stopping a run game, concentrating on your secondary and your linebackers with your pass defense here, you stand a good chance. Now, the other side of the coin is that everybody is going to be wanting to line up with Penn State after that tough loss against Ohio State in their most recent game at Happy Valley. They have a week off in between, so that formula appears to be a nice-sounding recipe. But, my goodness, when I put it into my database, Penn State at home, off a conference home loss their previous game, 0-9 to the spread, only 3-6 straight up. So they've struggled in games at home immediately after losing a conference home football game here. The bottom line to me, Greg, this is just too many points for a Michigan State football team that was in the talk to be in the run for the Big Ten championship this year. They bring a slew of starters back from the start of the season, 19 of them. Now, many you mentioned are hurting on the offensive side of the football here, but the defense is what keeps this football team in games, and I'm going to play them as a double-digit defensive dog in this contest.
All right, sounds good. More on that game with Hondo, top of the hour. Let's go to the NFL game. Start with the Thursday night game, Eagles and Giants. And Vikings were one of my top plays last week because I just didn't buy the fact that there was some issues there, and Mike Zimmer's on the hot seat and all that other ridiculous nonsense. I bought more into the fact that the Eagles are dealing with a Super Bowl hangover because that is normal. The Vikings are too talented to keep experiencing setback after setback. So I really liked them last week, and they came through for me. But the Eagles now on the road against the Giants, and the Giants with all the controversy with Odell Beckham and all of that, they sure played with some fire and passion. Look, they lost on a 63-yard field goal. So, I mean, what are you going to do about it? You can't do anything about that. More on the Giants in about an hour, 45 minutes with Ryan Dunleavy, beat writer for the Giants. So more on that game a little bit later on. But the Eagles are a 3-point road favorite here. This might actually seem a little easy for some people. They might go, well, why wouldn't I like the Eagles? Defending Super Bowl champs at the Giants. They've beaten the Giants 7 of the last 8 times. They're got to win a football game. They're just too good, and the Giants are dysfunctional. So what do you think about all that?
I think this is a nice spot for the Philadelphia Eagles here this week. They're playing like Super Bowl champions with that big bullseye target on their back this season. They become the number one team on just about their entire schedule's itinerary for the football season here. Everybody gets up for the defending Super Bowl champion as Philadelphia is finding out this football season here. But in my database, I look at Super Bowl champions, a couple of things. Number one, on Thursdays, they excel. They're 25-6 straight up, 19-9-3 to the number when they play on Thursdays against with a losing record, the Super Bowl champions, as Philadelphia has, 15-2 straight up, 10-4-3 to the number. But what I really like here is Super Bowl champions that are playing in division games when they're coming off back-to-back losses, 21-6 straight up and 18-9 to the number. This is all good stuff for Philadelphia in a win situation against the New York Giant football team that, as you mentioned, is coming out, that heartbreaking loss to the Panthers. They have a short week to get ready here. They're just 2-8 straight up in their last 10 football home games. And Pat Shurmur, their head coach, I remember him from his days in Cleveland when he was the Browns head coach. He does not do well against teams that are better than he is, that have a better record than he does. He's just 3-20 straight up in those football games here. I don't see the Giants suddenly getting good in this football game here. I see Philadelphia playing with a little bit more reason in this football contest here. I'm going to lay the points with Philadelphia.
Yeah, this is a tough one for me to go with, because I get the feeling the Giants are they're going to. I think if they keep playing like they did last week, they'll be okay. Just don't know if it'll happen this week or not because of who they're playing. The matchup, the rivalry, I don't think is a good one. National TV definitely makes sense. Super Bowl champs, they got to impress. They got to get up for this one. Let's keep this in mind, too, and this might be a little deceiving, but the last 6 games of this series has been decided by 5 points or less. But what's interesting is 4 of those 5 games have been on the 5 number exactly. So in that case, you take the Eagles and give it a 3, and you're doing okay in that spot. All right, let's go to the Sunday games and the Colts and the Jets. So you're taking my one of the games that I'll be zeroed in on with my New York Jets this season. And I think I mentioned on this show, I definitely mentioned it a few times last week, how much I like the Jets in the game last week, and that was really more of an indictment on Vance Joseph and his miserable road record, and just they're an overrated team, the Denver Broncos, especially on defense, and the Jets sure chewed them up on that side of the ball. But now they got to try to win 2 straight against a Colt team that all of a sudden is starting to lose some traction here. They're definitely better than the losing. You can lose and still look good losing. And that's, I think, what the Colts have been doing. They're still a lot better off, I think, than people thought they were going to be when the season began, even though they've been losing games.
I think they're playing better this football season than they have before. If for no other reason, Andrew Luck gives them a better look behind center here. He's put up some pretty good numbers, pretty impressive. Especially missing a whole season off that shoulder surgery here, and I think that's where the edge lies in this football game. I think there's a huge edge in talent and experience with Luck against Sam Darnold in this contest here. And this is Andrew Luck at his absolute very best in his NFL career. When his team's coming off a straight-up and point spread loss and they're taking on a losing opponent like the Jets are, he's been in that role 13 times. He's won all 13 games straight up and lost to the spread only once. This is the role that Andrew Luck shines in, beating up on losing football teams. Now you have the Jets coming in here at home off of a win, taking on an opponent off of a loss, and when they're both straight up and against the spread both ways. The Jets are just 11-29 to the number in that particular role. I think the wrong team's favorite here as we're speaking right now, and I wouldn't be surprised if a move goes to the Colts in this football contest before it's kicked off, where the case goes to pick them or the Colts as a small favorite in the game. But the bottom line to me, I'll take Andrew Luck over Sam Darnold in this contest.
All right, and then Baltimore and Tennessee will wrap things up, and this is a big game. You've got possibly the best of the North versus the best of the South. These are 2 teams that definitely are competing for those spots. Baltimore looking for, actually, they weren't able to win last week as a 3-point road favorite. Now they're trying to do it again against a Tennessee team who was playing some pretty good football. Look, I don't care what they did last week. I know maybe that's why they're a 3-point dogs. The reason why I don't care, the Bills were my upset pick last week. I thought it was a bad spot for Tennessee. I just did. They're not doing anything on offense right now. And then they had to go on the road, and the Bills proved, the Minnesota game, you could call it a fluke or whatever, but they did beat up the Vikings. So they didn't, and the Packers did nothing against them offensively. So I thought that was a good spot for an upset. So I'm willing to not care about that. But look, I still think Baltimore's a better team than Tennessee when it's all said and done. It's just that this is tough. Go on the road once again for the Ravens after a tough overtime loss last week.
Well, certain teams take on the personality of certain roles, and that's the role for Tennessee. Good dog, bad favorite. We saw that last week when they went on the road, as you mentioned, at Buffalo, laid points, didn't win the football game. Now they're going to come home and change roles into a home underdog. That's been a solid 58% play on the blind with a ton of games since 1980. That role changed the Tennessee's in this particular week. Marcus Mariota, their quarterback, is spotless. He's perfect 4-0 to the spread in his career when the Titans are coming off a straight-up favorite loss the previous game. So he fits into this particular role. The Ravens come in here playing their third successive road game in a row on the road, and the Ravens have struggled mightily against teams out of the AFC South. The last 35 games, they beat the spread only 8 times. I think Baltimore pays the price here for the schedule, and I think also because Tennessee's hungry, coming home as the dog off the loss. I like Tennessee plus the points in this game.
Yeah, it's good that you brought that up, that not only did the Ravens, were they the exact numbered favorite last week on the road, but they were on the road the previous week. So
right. 3
straight weeks on the road, and those were 2 North games. So just like we just talked about with Troy, the same thing in the NFL. It's the same way. You get those division matchups, those you amped up for those. And now you're playing Tennessee, so it's a little bit different. You throw in that AFC South trend, and that made a lot of sense. Mark, I appreciate it. Have fun with the games starting on Thursday night. Some good Thursday night games this week, and there's even a good Friday night game. And then we'll talk to you again next Wednesday.
Hey, my pleasure as always, Greg. I enjoyed it as well, and I'll catch up with you the next Wednesday. Have a good week.
You too. Thanks, Mark. All right, that's Marc Lawrence. And again, you can check out Mark at experts.covers.com. And Mark is with us every Wednesday here on the OFN Today. All right, so as I mentioned, we're going to talk Michigan State football with Hondo Carpenter in just a minute, and we're going to get into what's going on with Michigan State football. You can follow Hondo at Hondo Carpenter. That's his Twitter handle. By the way, you can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. You can receive our on-demand media alerts for every OFN show, including this one, and you can post comments or questions as well. Again, at PrimeSN. You could also email us, OFN@primesportsnetwork.com. So we'll talk about Michigan State injuries, what's going on there. A little bit later on, after that, it's Wisconsin football. Big game for the Wisconsin Badgers. That's going to be on Saturday night. I said this to Dave Koken yesterday. I as a Michigan fan, I got a good feeling about the game against Wisconsin being a Saturday night game. They don't get those night games much at Ann Arbor. I just don't like Wisconsin. The BYU game was a bad sign, and they're just way too one-dimensional. Hornibrook just never seems to improve. He never gets any better. And Michigan's defense is so strong that they just got to shut down that part of the game. And as long as the offense can generate some sort of points, then, look, they almost beat Wisconsin last year with terrible quarterback play. I mean, they were not a very good offensive team last year, and they had a pretty good run at Wisconsin on the road last year. So Saturday night, all that emotion, I think Michigan needs to prove to the nation that they can even beat considered a pretty big boy in Wisconsin. I know they're not an elite team like Ohio State, but still would be a big, significant win for Michigan. So we'll talk about Wisconsin football with Ben Worgull coming up in a few minutes. And then Ryan Dunleavy will join me after that to talk about what's going on with the New York Giants. Ryan Dunleavy, beat writer at NJ.com, covering Giants football, and they got that big Thursday night game with the Eagles. But let's go ahead and talk Michigan State football right now. With an old friend of ours here on the Our Lads Football Network covering Michigan State football. He's the editor of SpartanNation.com, Hondo Carpenter. And Hondo, thanks for talking to us again. It's been a relatively disappointing season, though, to cover the football team, and I know why. There's nothing more irritating as a fan or anybody in any sport that you're covering when that team is dealing with a lot of injuries, and that's exactly what's going on with the Spartans.
Well, I think injuries are certainly part of it, but far from all of it. I mean, the coaching in this is very rare to say in the Mark D'Antonio era has been terrible. It's just been absolutely horrible. The offensive play call, the offensive coaching has been terrible. I had a coach tell me one time, when you have a player regress, that's on the player. When you have multiple players regress, that's on the coaching staff.
Sure.
That tells you something's gone wrong.
Okay.
And multiple players have gone backwards. Guys who performed at a high level on the offensive line are not performing. Now, granted, they have had a lot of injuries, not anyway, but, when you get to the level where Michigan State's supposed to be, you have the most starters back. Think about this. They had 21 of 22 starters back. They finished the year with 10 wins last year. They were a preseason top 5 team. The injuries would be an excuse if you go to Happy Valley and lose to a very good Penn State team or Ohio State, but it's not an excuse when you're losing, the games that they're losing to a Northwestern and
Sure.
an Arizona State.
Sure.
Unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. And I think that they are walking right into a buzzsaw in Happy Valley that's going to absolutely be a defining statement for the Spartan season.
Yeah, maybe a major wake-up call, whether or not they've had that already. See, when I looked at the Arizona State game, it was easy for me to dismiss that with the temperatures the way that they were. They were the better team anyway for most of the game. I was willing to go, all right, West Coast game, 120-degree temperatures, you wore down late, couple of plays by Arizona State, Michigan State can't win the game. All right, whatever, it happens. But I think we saw in the first game against Utah State when they tried to run the ball a few times and get some key yards, they couldn't do it. And that's been the one thing, and it hurt them again against Northwestern. They can't get a couple of yards. They can't get a yard. And talk about coaching, you hit it right there on the head. You're having problems running the football, power football. You don't have a healthy offensive line. You don't have L.J. Scott, the biggest play of the game. You had issues all season trying to run the ball for a yard, and what do you try to do? Run the ball for a yard.
Yep, and that is exactly the Spartan season in a synopsis right there. And, this is a team that they're going to continue to try to run. Now, the advantage for Michigan State this week is the hatred for Penn State is not like it is for Michigan.
Okay, yes.
But let there be no mistake, James Franklin doesn't like Mark D'Antonio, and Mark D'Antonio doesn't like James Franklin, and either one would gladly run it up on the other, and both have.
Okay.
So I think that they're going to go into Happy Valley, and you're going to see James Franklin, who's more than willing to make a statement, and I don't think it's going to be pretty.
So you're thinking that this is this is gonna be that game that Mark D'Antonio is gonna get his wake up call, if he hasn't already gotten it.
Well, I guess I would have to define a wake up call. They know that they're struggling. I mean, they already have said. I mean, he came right out. First thing he said in his press conference this week is, "Listen, I think that every one of us knows we should be 5-0." He said he was depressed when he went to bed after a Northwestern game and got up depressed. I think that was the Arizona State was their wake up call. This is a team that all offseason talked about we need to score more points. This is a team that all offseason talked about the college football playoff and a Big Ten title.
Yep.
That was the talk of the entire offseason, not by just fans and media. That was the talk of the team. So they've already realized their dreams are sunk. They're not winning the Big Ten. They're not going to make it to the college football playoff. So now it's a reassessment of goals. And I think that this game is, because let me just tell you, then you got Michigan coming up next week.
Yeah.
And then I want to make sure it's very clear what I'm about to say. Well, Penn State is a really good football team.
Sure.
So I'm not calling it a trap game like Michigan State was overlooking Penn State.
Oh, no.
But what I am saying is around here, every single day in the building, the countdown clocks for the Michigan game.
Mm-hmm.
So remember, Pat Narduzzi gets his rivalry hatred blood from Mark D'Antonio. And whereas Pat Narduzzi puts everything into the Penn State game, and Penn State doesn't necessarily do that, Michigan State puts everything into Michigan. So I think there is a danger thinking, okay, you know what, we've lost these two games. If we beat Michigan, we can save our season. And let me just tell you something. If you get wrecked by Penn State, which is clearly possible, now I'll tell you this. I do not think Trace McSorley is going to be able to run all over Michigan State. That's not going to happen.
Okay.
This is the best run defense in America. If he runs, they'll be happy. But I think he can pass for 500 yards. That would not shock me.
And why is that, though? What's I know Scott's out, and that's a big injury, but what else? What's the problem?
Well, they're down
there?
3 corners.
3 of them. Okay.
Okay, and remember, though, their defense, and they're not going to change, is press corners, get pressure, stop the run. So but let me just say this. James Franklin has proven that he is a person who always wants to prove he's the smartest man in the room, and therefore oftentimes does things that are not smart.
Uh-huh. Sure.
So I could totally see him say, we're going to prove they're not the number one rushing defense, and try to run it up their stomach. I mean, this is the same guy that took the ball out of McSorley's hands when he could have beaten Ohio State.
That's true.
So, I could see him wanting to say, not only are we going to beat you, Michigan State, but we're going to crush you by running the ball, and the game being a lot closer than it should be. So if he does that, Spartan fans should donate to the Keep James Franklin and Penn State Fund.
Yeah.
But if James Franklin says, listen, I want to run the score up, they can't stop our passing game, have at it. It is going to be an unhappy valley for the Spartans.
Yeah, and they've also had a week to prepare for the game. It
Yep.
is a tough spot. Even though sometimes, and I know one of our handicappers brought up a good point, homecoming heavy favorites, that's something that could actually work against the home team. But Penn State's the better team right now. We know that. They're coming off a loss. Both teams are coming off losses. What about, though, like you mentioned how, all right, the season's over for a national championship. The season's over for a Big Ten title. But the season, of course, is not over for a Big Ten title. So why do you think – is this just history or stubbornness regarding the coaching staff where you believe – and that's why I said wake-up call. Do you believe that nothing is going to change regarding strategy on Michigan State's part, or whether or not anything can change strategy-wise on Michigan State's part for them to come out on Saturday and do something that you haven't seen or that you weren't expecting, and then they actually come out and play up to their capability on Saturday and win a game that all of a sudden changes their season?
I wrote last Friday in my pregame scouting report and prediction that I thought they would go 11-1 and win the Big Ten East this year.
Okay.
But and I thought that one loss going into the season, by the way, was going to be at Penn State, by the way, just for the record. I didn't think it would be Arizona State.
Okay.
But that being said, I said, losing Arizona State takes all margin away. They're playing for everything now with nothing to lose. If they're going to change, it's going to be this week. They didn't do that. If you didn't do it when you had no margin of victory and still playing for everything last week, if you do it now, your fans are going to be more pissed off than ever. Because why didn't you do it the week before?
Mm-hmm.
And when you still were playing for everything. So, no, if they didn't do it last week, I'm sorry. It's like a guy. If he's hit his wife once, I fully expect that he's going to do it again. And clearly domestic violence is much more important than football. But I'm using it as an example of past performance. Certainly is a great barometer of future performance. And if they're not going to change last week, before conference play, before there's a loss in conference play, they're not going to change this week. Not going to do it. And so I don't expect it. If I see it, it'll be great. I know it'll excite the fans, but there'll be a lot of people mad, like, why didn't you do it before?
Yeah.
Why did you have to wait till everything was over before you then said, okay, I'm willing to change? So, no, I don't expect it. The only thing I think that will keep Michigan State in this game, and listen, I think they've got a great defense, but I think the only thing that keeps Michigan State in this game is going to be James Franklin.
Okay.
If James Franklin, and in fairness to Franklin, D'Antonio doesn't like him either. But I'll just say this. If James Franklin does his usual coaching blunder like he did against Ohio State and decide, listen, he's got great players, he's got a great staff, and some of the best fans in America. I don't dislike Penn State. I'm just not a James Franklin fan.
Mm-hmm.
But if he goes out and says, listen, I not only want to beat D'Antonio, run the score up, I want to do it running the ball because
Sure.
that's what this man prides himself on, then I think Michigan State can keep it close.
Okay.
But Michigan State cannot beat Penn State without Penn State's help.
What about the fact that they're a dog for the first time this year, a heavy dog? What kind of experience? I mean, they have been pretty successful lately, 8-3 against the spread, which says that they have they've overplayed their hand and been able to win games even at spots where a lot of people didn't expect them to. So, what about that? Being a dog, does that in any way experience from what you know about this coaching staff, about the program? Is there just a different attitude that they have in this spot?
Well, Vegas isn't going to give them a shot that makes them all of a sudden perform at a higher level.
No.
So, no, I don't anticipate that. And again, I want to say this. I'm not down on the kids on this team at all. There's some high character, great kids. I just think the play calling has been atrocious. The execution's been bad. It has just been an absolute terrible season for Michigan State. And I think that it's going to go from bad to worse on Saturday.
Now, what about the health of the team? Any sense of when they can get healthier, or if they can get healthier?
Well, L.J. Scott's been cleared to go for 2 weeks, but he hasn't felt like he could, so he hasn't. Cole Chewins is back, the big left tackle. That's a blessing. He's a good player, great player.
Okay.
And but he's essentially back. I mean, he's played sparingly, but he's essentially back for his first real game of the year. Matt Allen has settled back in at center where he should have been all along, but the coaches trying to experiment didn't have him there early. Again, that was a coaching blunder. So I mean, I would expect LJ to play.
Mm-hmm.
But in fairness, I've expected LJ to play the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
So I mean, I do think he'll be there, but we'll see. So no, let me say something. When this game's over, I don't think injuries are going to be why Michigan State lost.
Okay.
I think that this has just been. I think Penn State's a very good team, and again, I said before the season, before there were injuries, that I thought Michigan State would go 11-1, and this is the game I thought they'd lose.
And by the way,
go ahead.
By the way, you also mentioned how you thought that while it would be a good year, you said on my show, when we talked about the preseason preview, that why you think this would be a good year, you actually expected them to be even better next year, that next year's team would be a better team.
Yep.
And what I also think is interesting is, and I see this happen a lot in both pro and college football, especially college, when there are no expectations for a team and they exceed expectations. And what seems to happen is that next year they go kind of backwards. And then you've got to wait for the next year for them to recapture those expectations. And it seems like that's what's happening with this team.
Well, that's not been the case under the Mark D'Antonio era, but it certainly appears that that's going on right now. Yes, I'll give you that for sure.
All right. It's just Josiah Scott, any word when he might be back?
Yeah, not this week. He's still a couple of weeks. I don't expect him back until probably 3 games left in the year, so that way he could play the last 3 and the bowl game and still redshirt.
All right. And who is anybody going to beat Ohio State this year in the Big Ten?
Not without Ohio State's help. And again, let me just say this. I thought Penn State, great game plan on a night when Ohio State didn't play well, should have beaten them.
Oh, yeah.
If I'm a Nittany Lion fan, I'm furious for James Franklin.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
I'm furious with James Franklin, and should be.
Sure.
That's a game you should have won.
Yep.
Should have won. No excuses. Hands down, should have won it. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a night when a team plays out of their mind and when Ohio State doesn't play good.
All right. Yeah, I think they're going to slip up at some point. I was completely unimpressed.
I do too, because that's kind of been their track record. But I'm saying it's good. But they're going to. I don't think there's any team in the Big Ten that will line up and just flat beat them on a night when they're playing well. But I do think there is a team I think there are some teams that if they're playing the best they've ever played, and which I thought Penn State did against Ohio State, and then all of a sudden Ohio State has a rough night, that I think they can be gotten. So I don't think it's like playing Alabama this year, because I don't think anybody's going to touch them. But I do think that they're the Alabama of the Big Ten.
Well, if Michigan State at some point in the next at least couple of games can get things going, then hopefully by November 10th they could be that team, because we know they have the talent to be that team.
I agree with you. Talent's there.
Yeah. Hondo, I appreciate it. We'll talk to you again some other time.
Thanks, buddy.
You got it. Take care. That's Hondo Carpenter. And Hondo is, again, he's been with us for the past few years, covering Michigan State football over at SpartanNation.com. And we'll talk to him later on down the road. A lot depends, of course, how the season goes for Michigan State. But look, they got a lot of key guys back again next year. This is why Hondo believes that they're going to be a pretty good team next year, as long as most of their players don't jump ship in the kind of seasons they're having. Look, they got a lot of key juniors. And as long as most of those guys decide to come back, and I would think they would. You know, we're not talking about any early round draft picks right now, first round especially. Good players, but players that could be a lot better if they stay for their senior seasons. The one key guy, though, that actually the 2 key guys they do lose are L.J. Scott and Felton Davis, who happen to be their 2 top offensive players. But, you know, you get Lewerke back next year as a senior, which you will, and then you have a really good defense coming back with most of their guys. And if they do have a disappointing season, that just continues to run that way, then I do believe that Michigan State will be a team that will rebound next year. But there's still a long way to go this season. We'll see if they can split here over the next couple of weeks. I know they prefer to split with Michigan. I get that. We'll see about Michigan. I mean, I'm still not. I need to see Michigan perform well on Saturday night. If they win an ugly game against Wisconsin, then and Michigan State, say, loses a good game to Penn State, then I think Michigan's in a lot of trouble next week because they just historically, in this rivalry, recently have not fared well. Against their little brothers. That's how the whole rivalry is looked upon. And the little brothers have been beating up the big brothers lately. But if Michigan State stumbles this week, like Hondo believes that that's very capable, that's very possible, and I believe Michigan's going to win going away in the fourth quarter, let's put it that way, then I think Michigan may finally have that chance to win, beat Michigan State, win a couple of big games against both Wisconsin and Michigan State in back-to-back weeks, and then they're going to need some time off because after that they host Penn State. I mean, that is a real tough 3 games in 4 weeks for Michigan football. Then they get a couple of games that they should win before they travel to Columbus to take on the Buckeyes. But we'll see how it all fares out right now. Michigan, of course, has the best chance with Penn State already losing. But if Michigan State, this is the game really. If Michigan State beats Penn State, then we know, of course, that Penn State is done. And there's just no chance for Penn State football this season in the Big Ten. But if Penn State wins and Michigan, let's say Penn State beats Michigan State, then Penn State beats Michigan, and then Michigan beats Ohio State, then all of a sudden Penn State's right back. Now, I don't know what decides the Big Ten championship, and I'll ask Ben about that, because a lot of times in these big conferences, if you don't have that head-to-head equalizer, then they'll go to the top-ranked team, which I am not a fan of because that's politics. But I'm just laying out the land the way that it is, just to show you that the winner of the Michigan State Penn State game still has a shot, a reasonable shot of winning the Big Ten, and especially winning the East. But let's bring in Ben Worgull, and Ben is Badger247.com writer and joined us here to talk Wisconsin football. So, Ben, do you have an answer to that question? The winner of the Big Ten, the winner of the division in the Big Ten, if it's a tiebreaker situation, is it like the second tiebreaker after head-to-head happen to go to the higher-ranked team? Please tell me no.
The tiebreaker for, if it's 2 teams in one division, so let's say it's Penn State and Ohio State, the tiebreaker goes to whoever won the head-to-head matchup. So in this case, it'd be Ohio State. If there's 3 teams involved, it'd be the record of those opponents against one another.
Okay.
So that's like the second tiebreaker, because if you have a tie in that situation with 2 teams, it's very clear this team is better than Team B. If there's no if it's down to a third, that's a good question what the third one is, because I don't think it's come up here recently, especially as it come up in the West with Wisconsin. Wisconsin's been clearly the front runner in that division since they redid it. But I haven't had to really dive deep into the tie-breaking situations. I think there's like 9 tiebreaker scenarios before it gets to the old proverbial coin flip.
Okay.
So I would love to know if it's Jim Delaney that's actually flipping the coin and who's calling heads and tails.
Yeah, right.
So that'll be interesting if it ever gets down to a situation where a division is so good, it's so balanced that they have to go down pretty far to figure out who's going to represent that division in Indianapolis.
Yeah, I don't remember which conference it is, but I do know that there are a couple of power conferences that go by. And again, I don't know which tiebreaker it is, but it's up there near the top where they'll go by who the higher ranked team is. And of course, they go with the head-to-head first. But
well, that's how Wisconsin got into the Rose Bowl about 8 years ago when they won the Big Ten. They tied with Ohio State, and they tied with one other school. I can't remember who it was.
Okay.
I remember they beat Northwestern like 70-31 on the last day of the regular season, and might have been Michigan State in there too. And Wisconsin got to go to the Rose Bowl because they were the highest rated BCS team at the time.
Yeah.
What the Big Ten used to do is, for the Rose Bowl, it's whichever team, if there was a tie, whichever team hadn't been there in the longest got to go to Pasadena. So it's kind of interesting how it's evolved with conference expansion and now different divisions, all the different tiebreakers and scenarios that have to come in play now.
All right, let's get into this football season for Wisconsin. Just one blip on the radar, and that was that BYU game. And, I always talk about how in every season you got to draw a line through a game, either a very disappointing loss or a big win. And then you have your real schedule, your real team up and down the board. With Wisconsin, it's obviously got to be the BYU game because it's not like BYU has looked any good since that game. But sometimes it happens, and you just got to throw it away because at least the very next week, even though things didn't look good for a while, Wisconsin trailing very late against Iowa, they were able to march down the field, and we've seen Hornibrook do this before, which is why he's teased us before. And all of a sudden, Wisconsin gets the win at Iowa, and now they're back in good shape, especially since the BYU loss wasn't a conference loss. So now comes the big one on Saturday night at the Big House, and it should be a great scene.
Yeah, a couple of different things to dissect there in that question. But when we first started with the BYU game, I've covered the team for 15 years, from newspaper to Scout.com to Fox Sports, CBS, and now where I'm at now at USA Today network. And I can't remember a game that was as disappointing leaving the press box at Camp Randall than that one. They were just thoroughly outplayed in that game. And they still had a chance to win, but it was just kind of I don't want to say it's a comedy of errors, but I don't know, for whatever reason, Wisconsin did not play well against BYU. It could be the fact that it was an unseasonably warm September Saturday, and Wisconsin just wasn't used to the heat for whatever reason, which sounds bizarre, but that question popped up post-game, and the players said, it was really hot in the field, yada, yada. Could be the fact that Wisconsin beat BYU 40-6 in Provo
I buy that
year before.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Wisconsin is looking ahead a little bit to Iowa the next week. BYU obviously came in with an agenda, wanting to play well, having been playing better than the game they were a year ago, going into that game. And BYU certainly was a lot healthier coming into this year's game. And the offensive line had gotten a lot of publicity. I'm working on a story now, actually, for BadgersInsider.com, just about the Wisconsin offensive line, how they had such high expectations coming into this season. And, on the cover of Sports Illustrated, they have so many All-Americans back, and they were just outmuscled by BYU in that game. It was like I said, it was just a strangely bizarre game. And it's not like BYU has turned into a Notre Dame independent team that's trying to knock down the doors of the college football playoff. They got crushed at Washington. They looked terrible against Utah State. So that's going to go down as a bad loss no matter how you cut it. You look at Alex Hornibrook, and the last 2 weeks are the prime reason why he frustrates so many people in this fan base. He leads Wisconsin to a huge win at Iowa, where they don't play well for 3 quarters. They turn it on late. Hornibrook only has 1 incompletion in the second half, leads a touchdown drive to put them ahead to stay. And the next week with a bye week and then playing Nebraska, just doesn't look real polished. Missing a lot of easy throws. Offense really sputters throughout the first half. Running game got going, but a lot of people are having success running the football against Nebraska. So now Hornibrook goes to an environment at Michigan where he's had one of his worst career games as a freshman a couple of years ago, threw 3 interceptions in a game that Wisconsin lost 14-7. Certainly a very winnable game for them. You look at this team right now, they're banged up defensively. They have a number of key starters, 4, who are on the injury report and listed as questionable this week. So we knew coming in this year that the defense was not going to be as good as it has been in past years. But this offense, with so many people back, including the quarterback, including some key offensive linemen and running backs and wide receivers, they could be a team that needs to score 40-plus points every week in order to win comfortably. And it has kind of been a struggle here over the last 3 games for Wisconsin. So it'll be interesting to see against a very good Michigan defense if Alex Hornibrook and this offense can finally put something together and really click. And like you said, it's going to be a fantastic little soap opera on Saturday night.
What about the receiver situation for Wisconsin? Of course, they lose their big tight end last year. the receiver situation, injuries, suspensions early on. Has there not been a go-to guy yet? Is that part of the issue as far as how the passing game maybe hasn't been as good as they had hoped?
Well, you're right in terms of what Wisconsin thought they were going to have this season. It's been a slow developing process. They're arguably the number one wide receiver, Quintez Cephas, is going to be he's not going to play this entire year. He's facing second and third degree sexual assault charges here in Madison. He's claimed his innocence. Actually just filed a lawsuit against the university for Title IX complications this week. So he's not going to play this year. There's no way that's going to get resolved. Danny Davis, one of their top young wide receivers from a year ago, was suspended for 2 games for his alleged role in the incident. He's been back the last couple of games. Really hasn't gotten going to that high degree like we saw in the Orange Bowl last December, where he caught a trio of touchdowns. You look at A.J. Taylor is probably their number one wide receiver. He seems to have the best rapport with Alex Hornibrook.
Okay.
The best job with the timing routes. He leads the receivers in yards and catches and touchdowns. He's been doing a really nice job in that situation. They've got some other young wide receivers that kind of contributed last year, but no one has really stepped up to a massive degree yet that really has opened up this offense. Certainly the tight end situation to lose Troy Fumagalli, not just from a pass-catching standpoint, but also from a run-blocking standpoint, has really hurt this team. Mm-hmm. They had a really good run blocker in Xander Neville, but he's been lost for the season with a left knee injury.
Okay.
So you don't have that extra blocking tight end in on those running plays. Wisconsin has had to go the last couple of weeks what they call their triple XL formation, where you bring in 2 offensive linemen wearing tight end numbers for kind of a super jumbo package.
All right.
Worked a little bit against Iowa, didn't see it a lot. They really didn't play it a lot against Nebraska because they really didn't need to. But certainly with this defense at Michigan being as talented as it is, wouldn't be surprised to just get that running game going to take some pressure off Alex Hornibrook to see that situation run a little bit more, probably in the double figures. Jake Ferguson is a redshirt freshman tight end that's done some really nice things this year.
Okay.
In a couple of years, could be a real stud player for Wisconsin. But again, just a redshirt freshman and still, kind of learning on the go, so to speak. And for a lot of these guys, this Michigan team will easily be the best team they'll have ever played in college. This will be a very tough test for Wisconsin coming up here this weekend.
Yeah, and they get to be the lucky team that faces Michigan under the lights, which just doesn't happen very often.
Right, yeah.
For Michigan. So I think we're all very interested and excited about the scene and what kind of game this could be. Now, talk about, because a lot of people, they look at this conference, and I must say, as a Michigan fan, I must say that and I'm a Rutgers fan, too, because I'm from New Jersey. So, and I'm like, boy, I got to get stuck in this division, with Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan State. And then you look at the West. I mean, has there ever been talk at all recently about changing this up? Because this has been going on for a while now. And then you look at it and you go, well, when is that ever going to change? Historically, it's never going to change.
No, Jim Delaney's been. It seems like every year Jim Delaney gets asked about this because the same story happens, where you have, tremendous teams in the East that beat up on each other throughout the year. That only one team emerges to really compete for that college football playoff. So then you have the West, where Wisconsin has just dominated the West Division, and so the bottom half of the West is bad. It's been bad for a long time. You have to give credit to Illinois and Minnesota and Purdue. They're kind of rebuilding a little bit, and they're actually showing signs of life to a degree. Mm-hmm. But there was a good stretch of time when the Legends and the Lears was thrown by the wayside, and it was strictly East and West, where the bottom half of the Big Ten, the West Division, just stunk. And you look at kind of right now with Wisconsin, you went into the year thinking, just Wisconsin's going to win their opener against Iowa and win that tiebreaker, and they pretty much have clear sailing to the Indianapolis and the Big Ten championship. That's crazy to say the last weekend of September that Wisconsin pretty much has it sewn up, because Illinois is really not going to challenge them. They've beaten Minnesota for 13 straight years. Yeah. Purdue might be a little tough. Northwestern on the road might be a little tough. Nebraska's been bad, but you would almost like to see a better competitive balance to a degree. But, Jim Delaney, getting back to where I was starting to go with this, Jim Delaney has been asked about this every year, and he says that, it goes in waves. It goes in cycles. That some programs who are up now will eventually start trending down towards the mean. Some programs that are down will start to maybe coaching change, recruit better, and they'll start going up and being more competitive. They use data from 20, 25 years of different winning percentages, and they try to make it fit to where it be a competitive balance. But there's no question over the last 5-6 years that the power in the Big Ten is clearly in the East. I mean, as a Rutgers fan,
oh, yeah, sure.
Look what you have to go through every year. You got Ohio State every year. You got the Michigans every year. You got Penn State every year. I mean, that's like 4 guaranteed losses for a rebuilding program.
Yeah,
it certainly is not easy sledding for Rutgers compared to Wisconsin, which just basically has to beat Iowa and maybe Northwestern, and then they're pretty much golden the rest of the year.
Yeah, and then you want to hang yourself after the way a team like Rutgers is playing this season because you already know it's a tough job to rebuild in the division, and the team looks like it's going backwards. This is going to take forever. So please bring Greg Schiano back. Get this thing going again, which is possible. I wouldn't throw that out. Talk about the so you think then it would probably need at least maybe another 5 more years of this before Delaney might actually think of it.
Because that's what he points to every year. Delaney points to is that as soon as you make sweeping changes to the divisions, then someone else is going to be unbalanced or someone else is going to be unhappy. And I think generally the fans like this split because you preserve more of the traditional rivalries. Before, when it was the legends and the leaders, Wisconsin and Iowa didn't play each other every year. Wisconsin and Minnesota had to be a protective rivalry because of the different divisions. This way, as a fan of Wisconsin, you have Minnesota just 4 hours up the road, Iowa's 3 hours, Illinois 4, Purdue's 4, Northwestern's 2. You can go to a lot of these games and you can relate to a lot of these games compared to if Rutgers and Wisconsin or Wisconsin and Maryland or Rutgers, Nebraska were playing each other every year. I don't think you'd have that same type of draw. So I think from a fan perspective, it's great, but certainly from a competitive balance standpoint, it's out of whack. Everyone knows it. And you would think at some point Nebraska will get back to where it's competing nationally under Scott Frost.
Yeah.
You have to think that Purdue might take a step forward. I mean, Purdue, 15 years ago was
they were
the top 10 team in the country.
Sure.
Getting Jeff Brom to stay there another year has got to be a step in the right direction for them. You have to wonder can the Big Ten West get to the level that the Big Ten East has been the last couple of years, and it'll be interesting to see with some of these rebuilding projects, kind of how they end up, shaking out to see if actually the Big Ten has that competitive balance in each division.
Yeah, because I am excited about the coaches there. Again, you mentioned Frost at Nebraska. You got Fleck at Minnesota, and then, of course, Brom at Purdue. And even Illinois is starting to – you got to give Lovie Smith some time. And already we're seeing some improvement from what they're doing there. So, because when I think about it, I say, okay, well, what are you going to do? And you can't separate Ohio State, Michigan, and Michigan State because you can't separate Michigan from either of those teams.
Right.
So that means Penn State's the only team you can move out. And if you move out Penn State, well, then what are you swapping in? And if you go, well, I'll swap in Nebraska because we don't want to separate Wisconsin and Iowa, then like you said, well, how do we know all of a sudden Scott Frost ain't going to have Nebraska as one of the top teams in the country in a couple of years? So,
exactly. And it's so hard in this day and age for coaches because you go into a situation, it's going to be a long-haul rebuilding process in a couple situations. And like Illinois with Lovie Smith, that situation, Ron Zook made the Rose Bowl feels like eons ago.
Yeah, right.
And that school has done almost nothing noteworthy since then. This is and so all those kids that Lovie Smith are recruiting have grown up with Illinois being bad at football. It just takes time to recruit. And Champaign's not an easy place to recruit to. It's in the middle of nowhere. And you need to go where the talent is, and that's Chicago. And the best players in Chicago aren't going to drive 2.5 hours down to Champaign. They're going to go to Notre Dame. They're going to go to Wisconsin. They might stay home and play for Northwestern.
Sure.
They could go to a bigger school in Ohio State or Michigan or something like that. So it's a hard area to recruit to. You just need time to build and develop, and a lot of athletic departments aren't that patient because they'll look at the blowback from the fans, they'll look at season ticket sales, they'll look at merchandising sales, say, man, this isn't going the way we need it to go, we need to make a splashy, we need to make a coaching change or make a splashy hire, and that's what you're seeing there in some situations like Illinois, like Purdue. Purdue had to move on from the Darrell Hazel fiasco and bring in an up-tempo guy, a high-energy guy, and that seems to be working for him. The key is now when you have a coach that does that, can you retain that coach? And that will be the kind of the key for a lot of these programs moving forward.
I mean, is the reason
on this rebuild process
is the reason, Ben, that we have the two divisions only because of a championship game? I mean, because that wouldn't even make any sense to me because Big 12 is doing it. And why couldn't you just have one big division and the two best teams go to the championship game?
Yeah, money, championship game money. I mean, you look at the situation. I mean, that's kind of what happened when the Big Ten added Nebraska. You had 12 teams, and then you could do equal divisions, and then you could have a championship game and get all the broadcast rights and ticket sales and everything that goes along with it. I mean, the Big Ten is not the best conference in the country in terms of competitive talent, but man, they're up there in terms of the money and the revenue that they generate.
Oh yeah, sure.
I mean that's part of the reason why the Big Ten is going to Friday games for the last couple of years, because they have access to the Big Ten network, which just is like a cash printing machine for them. They have ESPN contracts. They have Fox Sports contracts. They have all these platforms to which they can put television, they can put football games on that they're utilizing now, having football on another day of the week. They're starting to move conference games to the beginning of the year. They're going to be doing that more and more to kind of copy what the SEC has done to try to generate some interest. I mean, Ohio State, Indiana, or Purdue, Northwestern to start the year might not sound exhilarating, but it's a heck of a lot better than Wisconsin, Western Kentucky.
Yeah.
I mean, you have people tune into that. And so, the Big Ten loved the idea of having a Big Ten championship game to have a clear indication of who the best team in the Big Ten was. They really wanted to expand to the East Coast, so you expand to Maryland and Rutgers, who may not bring a lot for you competitively at the time, or still in some cases, on the football field or the basketball field, the two big revenue sports, but they're going to bring in a new market.
That's right.
And then they can sell that to a new market, and they can make even more money. I mean, if the Big Ten could, I'm sure it would extend all the way out to California just to keep, raking in the dollars. And that's the main reason why. I think all intents and purposes, it's been really good to have that championship game. For the most part, the best team has emerged. There's been some funky years, like 2012, when a 7-5 Wisconsin team won the Big Ten championship by hanging 70 on Nebraska. That was the year that Ohio State was ineligible because of free tattoos, and Penn State was having their issues with Jerry Sandusky.
Yeah.
And Wisconsin sneaks in, and a 7-5 team, third best team in their division, wins the Big Ten championship game. But for the most part, it's been great theater. Wisconsin, Penn State a couple years ago, Iowa, Michigan State a couple years ago. I thought Wisconsin, Ohio State wasn't good, and then it turned out pretty good in the second half.
It did. Yeah.
So there's been some pretty good games in Indianapolis, and I think that's one of the main reasons why, because it gets people talking about the Big Ten even later into the year than it originally was.
All right, before I let you go, is that Northwestern, do you think they're now, since Wisconsin beat Iowa, they're the most logical team that could stand in the way of Wisconsin? Because Pat Fitzgerald is one of my favorite college football coaches because, what he does with this program is unbelievable, and Thorson seems to be getting healthier and better every week. That maybe that, especially since that game is on the road, that maybe Northwestern is the one team Wisconsin has to worry about now?
Guess how many times Wisconsin's won at Northwestern since 1999?
How many?
Once.
Wow.
2 years ago.
Good one.
That's it.
All right.
That's it. It's a tough place for Wisconsin to play. Now, granted, they don't play there every other year, but it's been a tough venue for good Wisconsin teams to go in and play. And the one thing that has stuck out here over the last couple of weeks of Big Ten play for Wisconsin is their struggle in pass defense. They allowed Nate Stanley through a career-high 250 yards. Adrian Martinez last week threw close to 400. Wisconsin gave up over 500 yards of offense, the first time that's happened for the Badgers in the regular season since they opened against Alabama, who went to the national championship game that year in 2015. So big difference between Alabama of 2015 and Nebraska of 2018.
Yes.
But still, both schools over 500 yards of offense. There's real concern with how Wisconsin can defend the pass. And you mentioned Clayton Thorson. What he did, Northwestern had 8 rushing yards total and won by 10 on the road against a ranked team. That just shows you how good your offense has to be, your passing offense has to be to win.
Yep.
And Thorsten's been around a long time. He's a smart dude. You have to be to go to Northwestern, but to be a 3-year starter there, and he has been playing at a very good level, a very high level in Big Ten play ever since they started the season with some really funky losses. It seems like they've turned a corner, tough place for Wisconsin to play. That'll be a big game come up here in 3 weekends for Wisconsin. But they have to figure out a way, Wisconsin does, to get that secondary healthy and to play better. Because if they play like they did this Saturday, like they did last Saturday, Patterson and company, they're gonna tear those young kids up. It's gonna be an ugly game.
By the way, any key injuries this week?
Well, you have just strictly from a secondary standpoint. Wisconsin lost 2 really good cornerbacks a year ago. Derek Tyndall graduated. Nick Nelson declared early when was drafted by the Raiders.
Okay.
So you have 3 kids that are a redshirt sophomore, a redshirt freshman, and 2 redshirt freshmen. One redshirt freshman has a torn ligament in his right thumb. He's playing with a cast. Redshirt sophomore Caesar Williams did not suit up last week. Redshirt freshman Deron Harrell got a head injury early on and didn't play. So it was kind of like a mash unit late. They had to rely on a true freshman to play. Great name, Rashard Wild Goose, had to come in and play.
All right.
Dakota Dixon is the senior strong safety of the group. He's the team leader. Had a really good rapport going with redshirt freshman free safety Scott Nelson, but he was ejected for targeting last week, so he can't play in the first half. So a sophomore named Eric Barella is going to play. Andrew Van Ginkel, who's easily their best pass rusher, has been limited the last couple of games with a right leg injury. He's still listed as questionable for this game. And you have some players on the defensive line that's very young that are banged up as well. So offensively, they look healthy, which is a good sign. Defensively, it's another story. So the next 72 hours or so for this team defensively in the health department will be critical to try to keep up with a very balanced Michigan offense.
Ben, I appreciate it. Great job as always, and I'm sure Wisconsin will be either real close to or be in that Big Ten championship game, and that'll give us an opportunity to talk again later on during the season.
All right, looking forward to it. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Ben. All right, that again is Ben Worgull, and Ben is he covers Wisconsin football for Badger247.com. So, by the way, you can check out Ben on Twitter at the Badger Nation. All right. And Hondo at Hondo Carpenter. By the way, you can check out Marc Lawrence at Marc Lawrence. Marc's also got a website at playbook.com. So you can check that out. Ryan Dunleavy's next. So Ryan is going to bring in, we're going to turn our attention to the NFL and the New York Giants. So that's coming up in just a minute. And Ryan is at R.Y. Dunleavy. So you can follow him there. By the way, Marc also has a new website. He's the founder of Sports Data University at sportsdata.com. So that's a very interesting concept. You could check that out. All right, so New York Giants are next, and we'll talk about the craziness going on there with the New York Giants this week. They have the game against the Eagles. We talked about this before with Marc Lawrence. Eagles have won 7 out of 8 against the Giants. But the last 6 in the series has been decided by 5 or less. 4 of those 5 on the 5 number, which is very unusual. So the Eagles have beaten the Giants, or I should say the game has been decided by 5 points exactly in, 4 of the last 5? 4 of the last 6, did I say? Something like that. It's still a very unusual thing. But if the Giants lose, you would think the season's over. But it is a strange division because the Redskins haven't been impressive. Strange? I don't know if strange is the word. Maybe I should just use bad. The Cowboys are the Cowboys. So if you think about it, if the Giants can beat the Eagles on Thursday night, all right, and even though both teams would be 2-4, and then you've got the Cowboys and the Redskins, who in the world is going to win this division? I mean, how are you even going to think of predicting who's going to win this division if the Giants beat the Eagles on Thursday night? I have no idea how that's even going to be possible. Because if the Eagles win, we're all just going to go, okay, they're 3-3. They're going to get back to normal. Even if they have a Super Bowl hangover, they're still the best team by far in this division. It's over. It is over. But that changes if the Giants win. So that this Thursday night game is very, very important. And don't forget also the I forget what was the name of that movie. I think of that Mark Wahlberg movie. I forget the name of it. Miracle? Miracle was the hockey team. But what was it? Something Miracle, I think. Anyway, this rivalry took center stage. Eagles and Giants. And here we are again, even though this one's in New York. The movie, those games were in Philly. But Giants, Eagles, Thursday night, and then the other nationally televised games this week are going to be the big one, of course. Might be the biggest game of the year is going to be the Chiefs and the Patriots. We talked about that yesterday with Dave Koken. I'm sure we'll talk about this tomorrow. Matter of fact, we not only talked about it with Dave Koken yesterday, but we also talked about it with Matt Connor. He's the editor of ArrowheadAddict.com for the Kansas City Chiefs. So you can check that one out. That's already available, of course, on demand. That's on the OFN Today on Tuesdays. So Patriots 3.5-point favorite, 3-point favorite at home. I like the Patriots in that game. As I mentioned yesterday, anytime or most of the time I can get the Patriots and only have to give 3 points away at home. And Tom Brady is the quarterback, and Bill Belichick standing on the sidelines. I mean, when am I not taking the Patriots in that scenario? And if I lose, I lose. But that's, I think, part of handicapping, that you try not to think too much. Why overthink only having to give up 3 points at home with the Patriots and Brady and Belichick? So I'm not going to do it. I don't care how good Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs have looked so far this season. If they want to keep doing that and they want to keep keep rolling. And look, if you've taken the Chiefs since week 1 and you're riding this little 5-game run, by all means, keep going until you lose. I would do it. But if you've just kind of, I've taken the Chiefs a few times. Yes, I've been very impressed with what they've done. Hey, I'm taking them this week. I mean, they barely beat the Broncos on the road a couple of weeks ago. Try to sink that in. They barely beat the Broncos on the road a couple of weeks ago. All right? And that is not a very good team, Denver. I talked about this just a little while ago with Mark, about how we don't really know yet in the NFL. It's going to take even a few more weeks for us to figure out whether games that happened early in the season, matchups, results, how do we, because in college we're already there. We could and we went over it. We could already tell that certain games, certain teams just, you know what? They're not as good as I thought. I thought that win was better than it was. I thought that loss meant something that it doesn't. So I think we're at that point in college, and the pros, we're not there yet. So with the Chiefs, though, I'm sorry. I think you want, and we talked about this with Matt, you really want to know where the Chiefs are at this point in their big season. Go beat the Patriots on the road, with the Patriots as healthy as they're going to be all season, coming off a nationally televised loss a couple of weeks ago. All right. And so they've already got a loss. So if they lose this game, they go 2 games behind the Chiefs in the AFC standings, which of course means that the Patriots would have to go to beat the Chiefs in Kansas City, which is something the Patriots haven't had to do very much. Remember, the last time New England went on the road in a big spot AFC Championship game was what? A couple years ago. They go to Denver and they lose. So Patriots, they know how much better and easier their shot of getting to the Super Bowl is if they are the number 1 seed. So you say what you want, but this is mega important to the New England Patriots too. And that's also a part of the handicapping deal that you got to be thinking about is, well, I mean, what do I do with a team like the Patriots in a situation where I know that they're going to come playing for this game? Well, what do you think you're going to do? You're going to take them. You're going to ride the Patriots. Because not every week, even in football, which has always been strange to me. I've always not really understood why. But for some reason, even in football, we just don't know when a team is going to show up. And that's exactly what you know will happen on Sunday night. You know the Patriots will show up. And that eliminates any possible letdown situation or like the Detroit game. Oh, it's just one of those losses, which the Patriots always have early on in the season, it seems. They always have a bad loss, which we go, it doesn't matter. They've gotten through that already. All right? So we're not even going to be dealing with that right now. But you can go ahead and take the Chiefs. I'm going to argue with you if you take the Chiefs and you think they're a good play. Like I said, especially if you've gone with them already. You know, the Chiefs are playing some pretty good football. They can't be playing any better. But fact is, it's still, week 6? And we got a long way to go. Chiefs have started the season, as Matt Connor has said before, as the best team in football. And where is it taking them in the postseason? Oh, but this is different because we have Patrick Mahomes. All right, we will see. That's all I can say. All right, some of these other games this week, the Pittsburgh-Cincinnati game is going to be very big. Bengals are getting no respect, 2.5-point favorite at home. My preseason pick to win the AFC North. Apparently, nobody else picked them because they're the best team right now in the AFC North, and they're getting no respect, being just a 2.5-point favorite at home against the Steelers. All right, that's fine. And we'll see how that works out. But I definitely, that's something I don't need. I just got to check the injury report. That's all. And I know that there's been the bad blood between those two teams and all that. And I don't care what Pittsburgh did against Atlanta because everybody's burning Atlanta. And Atlanta psychologically right now is just in the crapper. So I don't look at that game to mean like the Steelers have already turned their season around or something. The Tampa game didn't turn their season around. And I don't really necessarily think that the Atlanta game will either. But this is the game that Pittsburgh needs to win to turn their season around. And I'll see it when it happens, or I'll believe it when I see it. Also, the other game that I think is going to be pretty interesting to keep an eye on is going to be that Chicago-Miami game because nobody thought that the Bears and the Dolphins would be in the spot this early. But I'm just not sold on the Dolphins. I said that last week. Teddy will be with me tomorrow. Teddy Savransky from Covers will be with me to preview some of these key NFL and college football games. And I like the Bengals, and I said the reason part of the reason was I got the wake up call with the Dolphins against the Patriots. It's one thing to lose that game, but in the manner in which they lost, see the few things when you're trying to buy into a team like the Dolphins, they get off to a really good start, and you kind of can see the issues, but they're still winning games. But you see the signs that kind of you don't necessarily think you should be buying in there. But then you also see signs. You go, well, but they're playing good defense and they're making big plays and the coach is coaching, strategically well and Tannehill's healthy and so you're wondering, well, maybe, and then the Patriots are kind of struggling and you say, okay, well, here you go. Here's the game. Show me you're for real. Even if you lose, show me you're for real. And the Patriots annihilate them. And the Dolphins making terrible, stupid mistakes, and the Patriots, of course, taking advantage of it early and putting touchdowns on the board instead of punting. And before you know it, it's a blowout. And then how do they follow that up? Well, that game, okay, that was a bad game. We'll be fine. Well, that's how they followed that up. They followed that up with a disappointing performance. I mean, sure, they had a big lead. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that they played anywhere near as bad as they did against the Patriots, but it was another one of the types of games where they looked like they did early in the season, where it was kind of ugly, but okay, they took a lead and maybe it looked like they were going to win one of those games again. They don't have an offense. I mentioned that before. They just don't. And I forget who it was who I think it might have been Teddy. Somebody said to me, yeah, but they've got Kenny Stills and they've got, I don't even know who else. Some of the other receivers, Jakeem Grant and Albert Wilson. I mean, come on. Am I really going to get impressed by that? I mean, these guys, Jakeem Grant's a nice kick returner, and maybe if he's on the Patriots, he can do something, or the Rams, maybe he could do something better with his career with the Dolphins, all right, again, fine. Gaze does a good job of getting some big plays out of him every few weeks, but he's not a go-to guy. And Albert Wilson, I mean, he couldn't crack it with the Chiefs. The Chiefs had all sorts of problems. Why do you think the Chiefs went out and got Watkins? Why do you think the Chiefs have been doing what they're doing now without Albert Wilson? They don't need Albert Wilson. He hasn't. If Albert Wilson was anybody that was going to be a big compliment to what's going on with Andy Reid's offense, they would have kept him. They would have found a way to keep him. So Albert Wilson, okay, he's made a couple of plays. I don't care about that. And Kenny Stills, you know what Kenny Stills does? Kenny Stills is kind of like Robbie Anderson for the Jets. So he'll catch these big 40, 50-yard touchdown passes, but that's all he does. That's it. And if you take that away, he can't really do much else. And the running game, The offensive line has already lost 2 starters. Ryan Tannehill is nothing great. So, yeah, so the Dolphins have got to win by defense. And the fact is that sooner or later in this league, there's just too many other good teams that have a little bit more balance, and I think that does include a team like the Bengals, and they eventually came back, won the game, and now all of a sudden the Dolphins are in a situation where if they don't beat the Bears on Sunday, they're going to drop 3 straight, and it's back to, I guess, the ultimate wake-up call. All right, let's talk about what's going on in the NFC East right now, once again by talking about this Giant game coming up on Thursday. So let's welcome in our special guest. He covers the New York Giants over at, actually, beat writer for the New York Giants at NJ.com, Ryan Dunleavy. Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
All right, Ryan. So I guess this is a great week for me to have booked you on the show because we did this last week with everything that's going on. I don't want to get too much into it because everybody's talking about it, and they don't need to listen to this show to necessarily find out about certain things. But is there anything as an insider, and you're around you're around the team, and you're around what's going on, just at the effects, your gut tell you whether or not you think this can ultimately be a good thing for the team, or is this going to be a problem going forward?
Talking about Odell Beckham's comments?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Look, Odell thinks it was a good thing for the team. I don't agree. People, Tony Dungy, former NFL players, Randy Moss, Rodney Harrison don't agree. But it really doesn't matter what any of us say. It really just matters what's in that locker room. And the guys in the locker room have either said that they didn't hear it, don't care, or Odell's clarification. I don't want to call it an apology. It's been called an apology. I don't want to call it because I don't think he apologized. I think he just tried to say, this is what I meant to say. And if it's not being interpreted correctly, well, this is what I meant. The word heart does not mean the same thing as the word energy and enthusiasm. So he obviously said the Giants need more heart. That, to me, if somebody said that to me, I'd be pretty angry. But it seems like the Giants are taking it in stride, and these criticisms of Eli Manning, well, Eli Manning's been being criticized since Odell Beckham was in junior high school.
Yeah.
So I think Eli's the perfect guy to let it roll off his back. I don't know that Ben Roethlisberger or Aaron Rodgers or Cam Newton would let it roll off quite as easy as Eli did.
Sure.
Seems like in the locker room, it's water under the bridge.
Well, you have to. I mean, when you go into that locker room and you do play and hang around and get to know Odell, and he seems to be a well-liked player in the locker room for the most part. You tell me if I'm wrong, but therefore there's a certain acceptance that you have with a player like that has an unusual way of expressing himself. And that's why I think that when I did see the way that they performed on Sunday, I'm not necessarily talking about the result, which could have been a win, but it looked like there was more fire on the team. So that seemed to work, didn't it?
Well, it's funny you say that because I've heard that pitched to other people. It's not by other people. It's not like they came out like a house. And I'm not disputing what you're saying, but it's not like they came out like a house on fire. Like, oh, look we're so galvanized.
Yeah.
Odell Beckham, and they were losing 17-3.
Sure.
And Odell Beckham was a big reason they were losing 17-3.
That's true. Yes.
So I don't know. I look, they're the loosest 1-4 team I've ever seen. They are not panicking. They are not. The sky is not falling. They believe they have a chance. The NFC stinks, so they probably do have a chance. They're a very loose team. So most teams hate playing on Thursday nights, injury risks and whatnot, messes up your routine. But I think the Giants are really anxious to get back on the field Thursday night because, A, they want to get the sour taste out of their mouth after losing on a 63-yard field goal, and B, they feel like they have a little bit of momentum with the way they played in the fourth quarter. It seems silly. How do you have momentum off a loss? But I guess when their first 4 weeks were as discouraging as they were, that tells you just, how grasping for straws they are, and maybe they found one.
What was the whole Shepard thing about on the sidelines?
He beat up a bench. He beat up a trash can.
Yeah.
That is frustration. Look, Sterling said he had some family stuff going on before the game. My policy is, I'll ask you about it if you want to talk about it. Okay. If not, these are men who haven't. We dive so much into their professional lives that if somebody wants to keep something personal in his family, I totally understand that.
Sure.
So he had some family stuff going on, and he also said he was frustrated. It was mounting frustration. It wasn't just the interception right before that outburst that led to it. That just mounting frustrations with the offense, with being 1-4, with feeling like this game was getting away from them when they really wanted to win it. I thought Sterling Shepard was an exhibit for anybody, his teammates included, on how to handle a small mini controversy. It wasn't a huge controversy, but everybody saw the video and everybody wanted to know how he'd react to it. And he owned it, he explained it, and he said it would never happen again. Okay. So to me, that's exactly how you handle something like that. It was knowing Shepard a little bit, having just been around him. Professionally, I did seem highly out of character, and it was kind of a nice role reversal to see Odell Beckham trying to calm down some of these emotions. It's usually the other way around.
Yes, that was kind of funny. Talk about the offensive line. Flowers is finally gone. How much better can this offensive line get, do you think, as the season wears on?
Look, I think there's two different things there, right? Like, I think they'll get better as the season goes on because I think offensive lines get better the more they play together.
True.
Like, I just think there's something to that. Every offensive line I've ever talked to says that to me, that there's chemistry and knowing where your guy is and all that, being on the same page. And that's one of those things practice takes perfect. I talked to the Giants Super Bowl 42 offensive linemen before the season, the O'Haras and Snees and Cybers and McKenzie's, and I said, how quickly is a quick fix possible? And they all kind of were like, like they might have done the right thing here. They might have got the right guys, but to expect it to be perfect week one is not right. And you think about it, that group that won the Super Bowl and beat the undefeated Patriots in 2007, well, most of those guys had been there since 2004 or 2005. So that was not a group that anybody thought was made of superstars or Pro Bowlers. Chris Nee became one, obviously, but that was a group that really just knew each other inside and out and played better as a unit than they did as five guys. So do I think the Giants' offensive line will get better as the season goes? I do, as long as they stay healthy. Cutting Eric Flowers is its own thing. Eric Flowers, look, he's not a first-round bust. It wasn't working at right tackle any better than it did at left tackle, so they cut him. Why they cut him at this time certainly is a little bit strange. They owe him the $4 million anyway. They owed it to him whether they cut him before the season, during the season, or paid him the whole way of the season. So it doesn't make any sense really why you cut him right now, unless it just tells you he just isn't liked by his teammates. I think. I think reading between the lines, that's pretty much it. He wasn't a good fit. Certainly no one was like, no one was like, oh God, I can't believe we did this.
Yeah, sure.
I just don't think he was particularly liked by his team. He never. I don't know if he was disliked. He just wasn't close with them. There's a difference between being disliked and being close with guys. And I just don't think he, had a lot of friends on the Giants and never really fit in. And I just think that maybe I don't understand from a talent perspective. What if, knock on wood, if you're a Giants fan, what if Nate Solder gets hurt tomorrow? Now Flowers might not be good, but at least he had 48 games of experience and some raw talent. Now, you're really strapped at tackle right now. So now you're rolling with Solder, Chad Wheeler, who was an undrafted free agent rookie last year, now in his second year, and Brian Mihalik, a guy who's played, a handful of games bouncing around the NFL as your swing tackle. I mean, I don't know that there's any doubt that the Giants have the worst, second, third, fourth tackles in the NFL.
All right. Well, they better stay healthy there. Now, what about this game? Because the Eagles have owned the series lately, even though there have been a lot of close games, but they've won 7 out of 8. And it is strange. I mentioned this on the show the other a little while ago, that this is such a big game in this division. Because if the Giants win the game, then all of a sudden you've got the heavy favorite at 2-4. The Giants have just beaten the heavy favorite at 2-4. Nobody believes in the Cowboys, and I don't think really many believe in the Redskins. So all of a sudden, you've got a division that's completely wide open. But that's if the Giants can win this game. So it just shows you how big a game this is.
Correct. It's a huge game for both teams, both searching for their identities. I think the Eagles, Philadelphia is a crazy sports town, a crazy Eagles town. So I think everybody down there is disappointed with the Eagles start, but still we're the best team in the division, so it really doesn't matter if we go 9-7, 10-6, we're still going to win the division. They lose to the Giants, the heat will be on in Philadelphia.
They'll be calling for Nick Foles to get back in.
And for the Giants, it's kind of the same. I mean, it's do or die. We talked to Michael Strahan this morning, and he said this is it. I mean, you either win or your season's pretty much over.
Yeah.
So, look, the NFC East is historically bad. No team has ever won the division with 8 wins or fewer in a full season. It's only the second time since 1970 that all the teams in the division have been 500 or worse after 5 weeks. So it's shaping up to be like that year where Seattle went to the playoffs at 7-9, or I think Carolina went one year at 7-8-1. That's
right.
Divisions go through this periodically. Now look at the South and the West; they're probably the two best divisions. Yeah. Uh-huh. So divisions go through this. So somebody's going to be a beneficiary. Maybe it'll be the Giants.
All right, injuries. What's the latest on Evan Ingram and, of course, Olivier Vernon?
So Ingram's out. He will not play. I'm not surprised on a short week like that.
Sure.
He'll have 10 days or whatever to get ready for Atlanta. I would expect him to be ready by then. Olivier Vernon is not on the injury report for the first time all season.
Wow.
So that leads me to believe he's going to play.
Okay.
Make his season debut. Look, Shermer says you never hold somebody out from one game with the next game in mind, et cetera, but I'm not surprised to see him back. He was really close last week, and they didn't play him. So if he's going to play only 4 days later, not 7 days later, I think that tells you how close he was against Carolina. Giants desperately need Vernon to provide a pass rush. They have the fewest sacks in the league.
Mm-hmm.
And then some other injury updates. Red Ellison is still limited in practice. If he doesn't go, the Giants are without their top 2 tight ends. It'll be interesting to see what Shermer does formationally there, because he loves tight ends. Shermer loves tight ends. He loves tight ends like McAdoo loved 3 receivers. So,
wow.
So will he still play 2 tight ends with Scott Simonson and Garrett Dickerson? Will he play 1 tight end? Will he play no tight end? Russell Shepard, who would be that number 3 receiver, possibly, he's out also in the game. Him and Ingram are the 2 guys who are out. So it'll be interesting to see what Shermer does formationally. Maybe you'll see a little bit more fullback in this game. And then Aldrich Rosas is the kicker, who is he was limited. He's not on the injury report, but he's been limited in practice. So I think he'll give it a go, but it'd be interesting. You hate seeing those games where the kicker aggravates an injury in the first quarter. You have to go for 2 every time, or the punter's kicking it, or whatever. Be interesting. Watch Rosas' grimaces or whatever once he starts kicking in the game, because that'll be interesting.
All right, and by the way, before I let you go, and look, Kyle Lauletta was a kid that we talked a lot about on this network during the draft process as one of the sleepers. He had a great Senior Bowl. Nobody really knows who he is still, but is the hope that he could be the guy that eventually takes over for Eli Manning?
I think the Giants think the Giants. Well, let me rephrase that. Let me start over.
All right.
I know the Giants think they got a steal in Kyle Lauletta.
Okay.
Does that mean Does that mean they did? I don't know.
Sure.
But look, Kyle Lauletta isn't even getting snaps in practice right now. It's kind of the way of the world in the NFL.
Mm-hmm.
The third-string quarterback doesn't get many snaps. But if the Giants are sitting here 2-10 or 3-11, I expect that Gettleman and Shermer, who were not shy to criticize McAdoo and Reese for not playing Davis Webb at the end of a lost season, would be awfully hypocritical of them to not play Kyle Lauletta at the end of this season. Now, look, I think everybody's hoping the Giants are, 6-8 and in a playoff race, and then they don't have to worry about that.
Uh-huh.
But if all is lost, I think you will see some of Kyle Lauletta this year. Eventually moved up to the number 2 quarterback, eventually playing in games. If all is lost, and then will he be the quarterback of the future? I mean, look, I think that's what they're hoping, but the Giants could also be at the top of the draft. There's, every year there's, Justin Herbert, or there's Drew Lock, or the kid at West Virginia whose name is Will Grier.
Yep.
So every year there's quarterbacks at the top of the draft. But, this draft, there's also about 4 top defensive linemen, and
that's
we know
right.
Dave Gettleman. We know Dave Gettleman loves the pass rush. So I don't know. Long answer short. They believe they got a steal in Kyle Lauletta, but who knows? If Eli Manning plays well, that Shermer and Gettleman might extend him through 2030. So we might not know who the quarterback of the future is till the time Eli's 50.
All right, Odell must like that to hear that one. So,
yeah.
But anyway,
and
look,
Little Wayne too. I'm sure Little Wayne.
Yeah. Look, hopefully the Giants win some football games this year, so the next time we talk again won't be to preview free agency and the draft, Ryan. I'd like to see it. Everybody would like to see it. That enjoys marketing the NFL, being the New York market. So, best of luck covering the team this season. Thanks a lot for checking in with us. And again, hopefully we'll talk again real soon.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, that's Ryan Dunleavy, NJ.com. Sometimes those, I don't know if, sometimes when I record my guests, for some reason, what I'm hearing over the air doesn't necessarily come through the recording, and there's something that you're hearing. But I think you heard those technical issues with Ryan. It's the more technology we have for our phones and stuff, then the more issues we get sometimes. But I don't know. That was we apologize if those technical issues came back to haunt our listeners. Yeah, just taking a look at the quarterbacks for next year, as Dan Shanka has just mailed me the 2019 Our-Lads NFL Draft Preview booklet. And by the way, of course, this just always changes. Matter of fact, I'm going to put out the midway point, my favorite players that I've watched this season in college football as far as NFL potential talent. I'm going to post that up at Our-Lads this week. And then I'm going to have Dan talk with me next week, and we'll talk about some of my players, which I'm sure have nothing to do with Dan's expertise on his players. But Justin Herbert is, and we've talked about Herbert before. We talked about him last week when we had Rob Mosley from GoDucks.com on our college football show. Herbert is definitely the prized quarterback for this year's class, and he still has a year left of eligibility, but if he leaves, he could very well be the first overall pick, and Dan's got him as the number 1 guy. Now, Dan has Dwayne Haskins as the number 2 guy, and I think this just shows you how much of a drop-off there is at quarterbacks. Drew Lock is the number 3. Now remember, these are seniors, though, I'm going over first. No, not seniors. What am I going over here first? I thought he usually had seniors here at the top at the top. Maybe he doesn't. All right. Anyway, let's see. Where are we next? Ryan Finley, top 4. Then you have Will Grier, 5. Jarrett Stidham at 6. All right. That's how bad the quarterback situation is in college football for this year's draft. When Dwayne Haskins, who looked like he was a high school quarterback against Penn State in that environment, and that's Penn State's defense, is the number 2 quarterback right now. Drew Lock, who really hasn't been consistent enough to be the number 3 quarterback for a good draft class. Jarrett Stidham is 6. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald is 10. I mean, Nick Fitzgerald can't throw, and he's 10. So I'm going to, let's see, I'm looking right now at this list, and I'm going to tell you right now, the guys that I think are better are Kyle Shermer. He's the 21. I would give David Blau a shot at 18. Don't care about the spread anymore. It ain't an issue for me. But David Blau was 18. Trace McSorley, I don't think he's a pro, but I definitely go with Trace McSorley before Jarrett Stidham. I don't care how much stronger of an arm Jarrett Stidham has. And I would go with Clayton Thorson for Northwestern, who's number 9 on the list. So that's why when you get a guy like Kyle Lauletta and you get him in the 4th round, you take a guy like Kyle Lauletta in the 4th round, because this year's draft class for quarterbacks is pretty bad. Because these guys, except for Herbert, but everybody else except for Herbert in this year's draft class of quarterback would have been 4th-round draft picks last year, in my mind. In my expertise, that those guys that I'll talk about with Dan in the next week or two would have been 4th-rounders next. I would have put Kyle Lauletta ahead of everybody on that list except Herbert. So that's why you get Kyle Lauletta in the 4th round and go after a guy like that if you're the Giants. All right, so that's going to wrap it up. Now, don't forget, email us, OFN at primesportsnetwork.com, OFN at primesportsnetwork.com for questions or comments. And you can follow us on Twitter at PrimeSN. So now, check back with us tomorrow. That's when we're going to we're going to have our ACC show with Jerry Radcliffe, and we're going to have a guest on that covers Pitt football for the Post-Gazette. So we'll talk about what's going on with the Pitt Panthers on the ACC show and everything else ACC football tomorrow. Also, OFN Today with Ted Savransky from Covers. We're going to preview several college football and NFL games with Ted. We're going to go over the futures for college football in the NFL. We're going to talk a little bit about that. So I'm going to really get into that tomorrow with Ted, going over how teams have fared so far, midway point college football, maybe even get some updated predictions from Teddy. But that's tomorrow on the OFN Today. And then we have our college football show tomorrow, too. Oh, by the way, Kyle Madsen's going to join us tomorrow on the OFN Today. He's the managing editor of the NinersWire.usatoday.com. So we'll talk a little bit about the 49ers and how things are going without Jimmy Garoppolo. But Dennis Dodd right now is scheduled from CBS Sportsline. He joined us on the very first college football show with Mitch Light when the season began. So Dennis tentatively scheduled for tomorrow's show in the late afternoon with Mitch Light. And then on Friday, the Jets show, Jake Arthur from Colts.com will join Randy Lang and I. Randy, of course, with NewYorkJets.com on the weekly Friday Jets show. And we'll preview that Colt-Jet game with Jake Arthur from Colts.com. All right, so and then, of course, Mitch Light and I will go over our picks in college football and all the other big games from last week and this week. So we'll have a lot to talk about college football on that College Football Weekly show tomorrow. So still a lot more to go before the weekends here on the Ourlads Football Radio Network at ourlads.com, where you have the very best pro and college football depth charts in the industry. And that's going to wrap it up. So thanks to Marc Lawrence. Thanks to Hondo Carpenter, Ben Worgull, and Ryan Dunleavy. I'm Greg DePalma. Thanks for listening to the OFN Today. You know the drill. Alpha, Mike, Foxtrot.